Hi, my name is Kathleen Jacobs. I work at Alanus University in Alfter in Germany. And yes, welcome to this very last presentation of the conference on the influence of product lifetime labeling. And I'm really happy, Carl, that you introduced it as a really practical issue, because I fear I'm now too scientific for you for the last presentation, but I hope it's a little bit exciting and you have some resources left to think with me about the idea of product lifetime labeling. That's a concept that has been dropped quite a few times during the conference. And some of you have the feeling that there is kind of a dilemma between more transparency for the consumers and the potential for sustainability on the one hand, and the problems with feasibility of testing procedures on the other hand. I'm, however, not touching the latter point, as I'm only focusing on consumer behavior here, so I'm sorry for the policymakers among you, but we can discuss it later on. Yeah, first let me lead you to my research questions, and I would like to start at the concept of sustainable consumption. Sustainable consumption is a key area of research and acting in promoting sustainable development. And yeah, it's part of the SDGs, and it aims at minimizing the use of natural resources and toxic materials, as well as emissions of waste and pollutants. So in terms of really reducing overall resource consumption, changes in not only energy efficiency, but also in consumption levels and patterns are necessary. So in this sense, consuming fewer products and also consuming fewer and longer lasting products and producing less could be a viable option for sustainable consumption. So consumers can already contribute to the product lifetime already at the point of purchase by deciding for the longer lasting products. But you have the feeling that there is maybe a problem, and in science there is a hierarchy of product attributes, and durability belongs to the so-called experience attributes. So it's an attribute you can't really estimate before purchase. You just use signals. It's an attribute you experience afterwards. Yeah, then you see how long your product lasts, but you can't really estimate it before. You use probably the price or the brand as a signal. So often that is rather insufficient, and policymakers and researchers claimed for more enhanced product lifetime information for consumers. Well, and there have been already some studies conducted concerning product lifetime labeling, and they found a positive effect on demand. However, those studies hardly considered the various determinants of purchase behavior, and also they lack the trade-offs between other product attributes. Also, research on sustainable consumption in the area of electrical appliances has mainly focused on energy consumption and disposal so far. And in general, there's little empirical quantitative research on purchase behavior focusing on product longevity. So drawing on those research needs, I came up with the two research questions. First, what are the determinants of purchasing long-lasting electrical appliances? And how does a product lifetime label influence purchase decisions towards electrical appliances? And just to have now a quick example about what we are talking about, or what we could talk about. Here's an example from practice. That's a screenshot from the website of the company Miele, which is a premium producer of large household appliances. I'm sorry, that one is in German, and they kind of have a label for a 20-year product lifetime, and they say it's tested for 20 years. And yeah, it's on their website, and here I also found a picture. This is now in English. They sometimes probably I don't see it all the time, but they somehow also have it on their products. That's written 20 years, German engineered and tested to the equivalent of 20 years usage. So just to give you an impression of what I'm talking about later on. So going back to science, I first built up a theoretical model to answer my research questions. And I chose an interdisciplinary approach by using theories from economics and social psychology. On the one hand, I used the consumer theory of Lancaster, which says that consumer preferences are not directed to the goods themselves, but to their attributes. It's a really well-established theory for explaining decision-making of consumers. However, as you may feel, the theory lacks other psychological concepts except for preferences. So I also chose the theory of planned behavior. That's a really well-known theory in social psychology, and it has been applied in the sustainable consumption area quite a few times. And it says that a person's intention to engage in behavior is determined by attitudes, by social norms, by perceived control mechanisms. So there are various psychological concepts. But however, compared to Lancaster's theory, it lacks explanatory power in consumer choice contexts, as it lacks the different product attributes. So they somehow seem to be a good match, and similar to Nocella in 2012, I also put those two theories together and combined the theory of Lancaster with the psychological constructs of the theory of planned behavior. You see it here with the blue frame. So we have, when we start at the right side, what we want to, or what I want to explain is the preference for a long product lifetime, which is in the study, in the experimental study, which you see later, is signaled by a label. So, and we have the attitude to social norms and perceived behavior control regarding purchasing long-lasting electrical appliances. And I assume that they influence this preference. So imagine I have developed different items, I mean questions in a questionnaire, accounting for attitudes, social norm, etc. And I differentiated the attitudes to account for different motives. So I think there are egoistic motives to purchase longer lasting products, to save money, to save time in the long run. I think there are ecological motives as well, to reduce resource consumption, to reduce waste, etc. And I also added other concepts which are broader and found to be very important in consumer research. You find in here, find it on the left side in the green frame. So we also measured values, basic human values and materialistic values. We also used a scale on consciousness for sustainable consumption, which differentiates different concepts of sustainable consumption: collaborative consumption, pro-environmental consumption, simple consumption. And I also think that past behavior regarding product usage might be important. Whether I have used my products for a long time before, I may be more interested in a label. So there are a lot of hypotheses behind, but I don't have the time to refer to that in detail today. So what happened so far? I collected data for a pilot study. So this is based on an experimental online survey which uses choice-based conjoint analysis. I'll come to that again. I interviewed German consumers. I used an online panel of a market research company and also my personal network. And for the pilot study, I reached 409 usable questionnaires. Yeah, and I just collected the data, as you see, at the end of last year. And here you see how the sample looks like. I compared it to the German population, and as expected, as it was not the intention to have it population representative for the pilot study, you see, for instance, when you look at the educational achievement, that the sample is, as expected, a lot higher educated than the population, or the respondents tend to be younger when you look to the age categories from 20 to 40 years. So that's a typical pattern you have when you are not really focusing on population representativeness, and we have to have this in mind when looking at the results. So yeah, it's especially, a bias is especially there with regard to education. You see university degrees, but as I asked also colleagues, etc., and higher educated people are more willing to fill in the questionnaire, that is what happened. So let's have a look at the data analysis, and the main and most complex tool I used is the conjoint analysis. This is a multivariate statistical method to assess consumer preferences based on the theory of Lancaster, which we already heard. It's a decompositional approach to analyze utility structures. What does it mean? It means that we derive the preferences for single product attributes based on an overall judgment. So respondents are asked to evaluate a whole product, which consists of is characterized by different attributes. And the respondents are not asked, do you like a product lifetime label? What do you think is, and you would always cross, it should be a long product lifetime, it should be a good energy efficiency, a good brand, a low price, and so on. So that is traditional market research, and it's not realistic. That is compositional, and conjoint analysis does a decompositional. So we will see what I mean. So it's more realistic and has a lesser problem of the so-called attitude-behavior gap later. I especially use choice-based conjoint analysis. It's the more realistic version. So consumers are confronted with choice situations, and I use this sort of software for this. I also did other statistical analysis with the software R, such as factor analysis, regression analysis, all those things for like the other side purposes. So let's focus on the choice situation. You need to choose attributes, and it should be like the most important ones, and you can't use too many. I mean, it's an experiment. And you see, I chose brand, equipment, price, energy consumption, and the expected lifetime label. So that's kind of the new thing, which is not like there in the market yet. And those attributes have different levels. So you see the different levels of the attributes later. So this is now translated into English one choice task for the respondents. Imagine you have a questionnaire with a lot of questions, then you have those purchase decisions, 12 per respondent, and you have to decide between 3, and we chose washing machine here. And they vary in the attributes, brand, expected product lifetime, etc. And you have to choose one. You can also say, I wouldn't buy any of these. I skipped the introduction here because it's too long, but it's very important as it explains the label. So we said, imagine you're now purchasing a washing machine, and it's a 7 kilo A+++, and so on. We chose a standard machine, and I realized in the market there's like 90% A++ washing machine. So we fixed some attributes already. And then we said, imagine there is a regulation that all companies need to have a product lifetime label. It's obligatory, it's tested by an independent agency, kind of similar to the energy label. It's based on an endurance test with 220 washing cycles per year. That is similar to the test of Miele, which I showed you. So I hope you now get the feeling of the questionnaire a bit. And well, then let's have a look at some preliminary results. It's a difficult word. Regarding the utilities. So the utility reflects the desirability. So the numbers, they don't have units. They don't really have a meaning. They only have a meaning when you compare them. So don't wonder about minus 17 something. Just look at the diagram and you see the utility values and increase compared to other brands here. The higher the utility, the more important the attribute level is in purchase decision. And this is now the average of the sample. So the average respondent has this utility structure. And I think that's quite reasonable. As we know, Miele is a premium brand, so people really prefer it in this industry. And now let's have a look at a label, which is very interesting. I chose 5 different levels from 5 years to 25. You should have kind of some extremes at both ends when you design a conjoint analysis. So I choose 5 and 25, and you see how utility increases, and it's still quite a strong increase also from 15 to 20 years, but especially also from 10 to 15 years. And in the next weeks, when I go further analyze the data, I also want to do a willingness to pay analysis. You can transfer those utilities also in willingness to pay and say, like, the consumer is willing to pay so many euros more per 1 year more lifetime. But I'm not at this point now. Let's have a look at the other attributes. You get an impression of the energy consumption. I chose those levels, and yeah, we can discuss it later. I didn't go so much into the equipment version. I really had to narrow it down. Of course, you have many programs and so on. I think I wrote it here. Basic means basic wash programs. Extended, I added also energy and quick wash programs, start time pre-selection, automatic load detection, and for the premium version, I added like fancy things like automatic metering, textile detection, and control with smartphone. So I felt it's now the innovation maximum, and it's probably consumers may not see such a big difference in utility. Probably they don't need so many fancy programs here and functionalities. And the price, of course, the utility increases, decreases with a higher price. That's, I guess, a logic process. I also found an interaction effect with product lifetime, which means that the benefit of having a low price and the benefit of having a high product lifetime together, combined together, is a greater benefit than both separately. That is meant by interaction effect. These kind of analyses are very interesting for designing products as well. So, and that is probably the most interesting chart here. And I'm sorry, the frame, I don't know, went a bit wrong. So, but what you see is here the average importances for the 5 product attributes in the sample. And as you know, only the product lifetime label is new. All the other product labels have been on the market before, and you see those importances are deducted from the utilities. I don't go into the formulas now, but what we see is that after the price with 33%, the product lifetime label is the second most important product attribute. And then comes energy consumption and the equipment version and price. Of course, everything depends on the design of the choice experiments. We can question everything, but I think that is quite striking. And I know we are dealing here with a workhorse product, so durability is quite important for a washing machine, and it's very interesting to do it with smartphones and other more up-to-date fashion electronics. And that's the last result slide here. You may remember that I built up this whole model, and I wasn't really talking about it anymore. It's because I'm still into the data analysis of all those psychological concepts. And if there are some psychological researchers among you, you know you have to validate scales and do factor analysis, and it's quite a lot to do. And I've started all this to find some causal relationships to the lifetime label. And so far, I can say, based on simple and multiple regression analysis, that I found some promoters, and I mean characteristics of people who really like a long product lifetime, to put it simple. And when we look at values on the left side, some of you might know the value theory of Schwarz, and he puts all those values together. That's very established and used in the European Social Survey. And there are those self-transcendence values, which are biospheric and altruistic values. That is meant by universalism, for instance. And I also found that people who are strong in those values also prefer longer product lifetime. And they're coming back to this, you see in the next rectangle the consciousness for sustainable consumption. And I already said we took different concepts of it, and I found that this pro-environmental and pro-social consciousness also promotes product longevity. I think that is plausible, as well as an affinity for collaborative consumption, meaning sharing and so on. And also a longer product usage, a past product usage referring to a really long product lifetime, when you think the consumer is sensible to repair, etc., also promotes my preference for the label. With regard to barriers, I tested the material values, and those are values we ask respondents things like, I'm always sad that I cannot buy all the things I want to, and I'm really jealous about people who have all those luxuries. So it's about materialistic values, and those tend to be barriers of a preference for long product lifetime. And there seems to be a tendency that a worse financial situation and lower income is also a barrier for the label. But this is very preliminary. So coming to the implications, well, information about consumer preferences, attitudes, and so on product lifetime is very important and can be used by practitioners in the electrical appliance market. Product lifetime is, next to the price, the second strongest purchase criterion, but we have to keep in mind the sample I used. And so you can use the product lifetime label for durability, marketing. Barriers should be enhanced, reduced, and drivers enhanced regarding purchasing longer lasting appliances. And yeah, researchers, from my point of view, should really extend research on sustainable consumption in the context of product longevity. And they should test product lifetime labeling in different countries for different product categories. My to-dos are, as I already said, I will do willingness to pay analysis and more trade-off analysis. You know, I also have measured a preference for energy efficiency, and I will compare it with product lifetime label. And also, I also have some questions regarding my affinity to innovation. So I will in future touch these issues as well. I will validate the scales, and I'm about to do then a main study, as this was a pilot study, in 2018, in the next weeks or months, And probably I'll compare a label with a non-label situation, as I only have the label situation here. I'm also interested in the potential of the label in influencing our values, like influencing back. When you look at the right side, how does a label influence like our main values and attitudes? So are there spillover or spill-back effects? And yeah, it would be interesting to figure out what's the influence on second-hand products. Imagine there's a 5-year product having a 10-year label on it. So how does the purchase situation develop in this scenario? Okay, that brings me to the end of my presentation and the last presentation of the conference. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy for your remarks.
Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. Can I ask, in terms of the interaction between brand and lifetime, do you think there was any, this might be difficult to say, but do you think there was any perception about different brands would have different levels, the veracity of the claims, so that you're more likely to believe certain brands when they say that this product's going to last for a longer time, and whether there was an interaction between those two things?
I really guess so. It's on my to-do list as well. I did some first interaction analysis. I only found the interaction between price and label, but I really guess, and of course depending on the brand, that there will be interaction effects with the brand and the label as well. But if you think of Miele, well, in practice, what does a product lifetime label like really, like, are there benefits for such a premium brand focusing on durability? But what about startups, brands you don't really know? Maybe there are effects, but I can't say anything today as it's still in process. But good idea, thank you.
It's Antoine Durand from Easy. I just wonder, now we have appliances which have a lot of connectivity or information. I just wonder, in 20 years, how can you run the machine with an old standard for your old smartphone? I fear that most of the functionality will not work anymore, and therefore the 20 years warranty will be more or less useless.
Sure. If I would do an experiment with smartphones, and the whole attributes and attribute levels would be different. Of course, we wouldn't talk about 25 years. I mean, we talk about 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I think those like smaller steps would make a big difference. And I, of course, chose, let's say, an easy product first, because when we talk about smartphones, we need to kind of, it's hard to think about a label when you think about the software and the hardware durability aspects. So it's more complex, but there is actually a study from 2013 from the States where they did kind of choice-based conjoint analysis with durability. They didn't use a label. I think they used modularity information and spare parts information. Probably I would try something like that. But that would look completely different to this.
Really short. Yeah, I just wanted to find out here, based on your research, did you look at the effect of the product lifetime labeling to the need to increase the uptake of energy efficiency product into the market, looking into consideration the fact that you have a historically inefficient production of products which have been rolled out for many, many years. And if you want to look or create an uptake into the consumption of energy efficient products into the market, you would want the phasing out of these old products as quickly as possible.
I know what you mean. I of course, I haven't analyzed it in my study as I looked at consumer behavior, but that's the debate on when is product lifetime not energy efficient anymore. Like that's a dilemma again, and I chose a product where the energy efficiency is already at a high point at a learning curve. So I think here we can talk about product lifetime. And I mean, we see that there are companies out there who put a label of 20 years on their washing machine. And there are studies, but I'm not so much in the LCA thing, but that's really interesting when they compare a low energy efficiency with a high energy efficiency product. I think it was with laptops, and it was the Eco Institute in Germany. And they found, or they asked the question, is it reasonable for the consumer to replace a product which is still functioning, to replace it with a more energy efficient one? And they found that you should use your laptop actually for, it was so many 70 or years, many years. So it's, I think, often kind of false when you are high at the learning curve with regard to energy efficiency to really question longer product lifetime. I think we are, that's a discussion, and we should look at figures and specific product types. So I think I should stop here.
Good. Thank you very much. I think there are a few more questions, but then you have a lunch date here. Great.